right, we are back with Sharon Cheslow,
Yes.
and that was amazing, Sharon.
Thank you.
That was so good. It was just like, I was holding the camera and just like, oh, I feel it.
Great.
Yeah. So thanks for coming. How did you start doing like all this stuff? What was your beginnings in playing music and making amazing sounds? Because that was awesome. That was so good.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. It's really been a joy. Actually my background is in punk. I was in a lot of bands in Washington, D.C. in the early 80s, late 80s, early 90s. Actually moved to San Francisco in 1990. So all through the 80s I was doing music, was fairly involved in the D.C. hardcore scene, and did fanzines and did photography, and was one of the women who compiled that book band in D.C. I don't know if you've seen that. And really liked the idea of punk. I mean, I think it's hard to think of it now as being this way, but at that time it was like what I'm doing now. It was the avenue to freely express yourself and to explore ideas, and especially conceptual ideas. And it's lost that, I think, people forget that it had that beginning. But that's what attracted me to it. And then when I moved to San Francisco, I stopped playing out. I kind of got tired of being in bands. And then I met Kathleen Hanna, who was in Bikini Kill, through Tim Green, who was in Nation of Ulysses, and I had been collaborating with Tim in Washington, D.C., and then he moved to Olympia, Washington, and it was through him and through her that they encouraged me to start playing music again. And so I was in a band with Kathleen called Suture, and I was in a band with Tim called Red Eye, but they were collaborations. And that was sort of the first way that I thought of doing bands, not the traditional way of going out and touring all the time, because I'm kind of like an artist at heart, or a scientist at heart. I'm very solitary in what I do, and I'm not into touring all the time like a lot of my friends do.
So how did you make that transition from playing like punk to something that's not really traditionally seen as playing punk,
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of things happened around the same time in the mid-90s. The first is that I saw this really amazing exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco on Fluxus. And I'd always loved Fluxus. Yoko Ono is a huge inspiration to me. I had loved her music and film and art and writing, from the 70s, 60s, late 60s and 70s. But I had never seen sound works in a museum before, and it kind of made me think, because I had always done both, music and art, but they were always separate. And it was the first time I really thought of maybe integrating them. And then another thing is that there's a composer and sound artist named Carl Stone who had a radio show on KPFA, and he brought back some recordings from Japan and Europe. He brought back Otomo Yoshihide, and he brought back this Swiss group called Voice Crack, and he used the term sound art to describe these works where, free improvisation, noise, sound collage, and I'd never heard the term sound art before, and I thought, that's what I want to do.
Right.
And then, actually, Steve and I were just talking about this today. I saw Keiji Haino at Bottom of the Hill, and he's an amazing noise improviser, guitar improviser, and just sort of opening my mind to different ways of playing the guitar or making sound in a non-band context.
How did you start doing collaboration from that? Like what we just saw with Steve Kim was amazing. So what other kinds of works have you been doing with other people?
That's a really good question. It was hard at first because I had been used to, when you're in a band, you have rehearsals, you rehearse 2 or 3 times a week, and you have shows, and it's the same person over and over. But I like the model in jazz where you collaborate with a lot of different people, or even in certain art projects where you'll collaborate with different people, and it's on a project-by-project basis. And I had been thinking a lot about ways to incorporate that into sound practice, and so I guess starting in 1998, that's kind of when the last release I did with Tim Green with Red Eye, and then I also was in a band called the Electrolettes with this woman Juliana Bright who went on to the Quails. So those were sort of like the last bands I was in. And then in '98 I started doing sound collages on my own, just on the computer, and thinking of ways. I mean, I had started to do it in the electrolets. And then I thought, okay, well, what if I did recordings of my guitar, my vocals, electronics, and then combined it with what I'm doing with the digital audio, and then played it for people and had them come up with their own parts. It's kind of like what you do in a band anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? But it's more improvisatory. So that's sort of how I did it. And the first people that I sort of experimented in doing that with were Greg Saunier and John Dietrich of Deerhoof. And that was great because they were really supportive. And it helped me see that, you know, I could actually play with different people and not be in a regular practicing band. But I could have an idea first, ask people to play with me, and then do it. Then I started to think of how to structure it so that it facilitates collaboration, and thinking of it as a way to encourage people, one, to work together, right? Which is very difficult.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good practice. And the second is how to be in the moment with what you're doing. So trying to encourage that, because I think it expands into all areas of your life.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's how it started.
Wow. That's really amazing and beautiful. And yeah, it seems like you're constantly doing this, and you're making like lots of like art and video and audio, and yeah. Is there anything you'd like to share with like the people out there? Just like
and before I do, I just want to say that Steve Kim, who I collaborated with tonight, he's one of my main collaborators here in LA.
okay.
We collaborated together with Stan Meister, who is Steve's roommate, on a sound performance at Arts Exchange, and then Steve and I are going to do a duo this Sunday at the Smell.
Cool.
But yeah, I guess I've done a bunch of different small edition CD releases. I like them as little art pieces.
Yeah, definitely. That's good.
And then I have done video too, not a whole lot, maybe 3 short experimental videos, and I usually do the audio first and then do the video to it, kind of trying to explore how we see, because normally when you think of video, you find the images first and then you put sound to it, right? So I wanted to approach it from the opposite end.
Oh, that's amazing. I really like that. I really like, like how you're approaching everything, and it sounds really like just open, and like you're allowed to do so many things and change so many things. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
can I say one thing?
Yeah.
One more thing?
Yeah.
Well, you know, really what pushed me, I mean, I've always felt this way, that it's really important to just break boundaries and be free to express yourself in whatever way is true to yourself. But I really felt it after September 11th, and I really felt it after the war in Iraq, and it's just gotten more intense as the years have gone by and things have gotten worse in this country. And so I feel collaboration is maybe one way that creative people can find their voice.
Yeah. And to get through, definitely.
Yeah. And you do it too. You have great work.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, thank you so much.
Yes,
Sharon. This has been so
thank you
amazing.
for having me here.
Yeah, awesome. And thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time on The Gaze.